Good morning, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure, first of all, to be in person. You are the second client I've had the privilege of being in front of in person, so I'm very grateful to be here. We're also really privileged to have been selected for this work. Valencia College's reputation precedes it in so many positive ways. One of the things we've learned about your institution is the brute force with which you accomplish tasks, whatever the challenges are that may face you. Your highly personalized connections to your students, which make you very distinctive in the marketplace. CampusWorks has a 22-year history of serving community colleges exclusively. Over the last 22 years, we've grown our portfolio to also serve four-year private institutions. I can tell you that in our client portfolio, Valencia will still stand tall as one of the finest institutions that we have the privilege of supporting. That said, you are putting an extraordinary amount of pressure on the team that currently supports student services and student affairs. Every institution in the nation pivoted in a way we thought was impossible for higher education during the pandemic. If you would have told us that we would have been able to, in a matter of anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks, go from completely in-person, on ground, to absolutely remote, whether it was an instruction or registration or filling out and approving financial aid, I would have said, as a 37-year veteran in the higher education profession, no way. Yet we did it. Now the challenge is, how do we take what we learned from that? How do we take the expectations that have completely been reset by our students? And how do we stand up to a more modern way of delivering services and exceeding student expectations? The engagement that you're talking about, partnering with us on, will take you from first developing an aspirational student experience. You're actually going to define, with input from faculty, students, staff, and administration, the student experience you want every single student at Valencia to experience. You're going to talk about the words you want them to say when they talk to somebody else in their neighborhood about the experience they're having at Valencia. We're also going to talk about what it's going to take from faculty, staff, and administration to empower that experience. And only after that experience is defined are we going to stop and say, what is it going to take for us? The processes, the knowledge, skills, and abilities, the policies, the technology to make that student experience a reality. What's happening right now is a lot of people, particularly in the student affairs and student services areas, working tirelessly without being able to pick up their heads, and by sheer force of will, making those connections with students. There just aren't enough hours in a day. I was astounded to learn from the president last night that during the pandemic, you made 100,000 personal calls to your students. 100,000 personal calls. I don't care what they're telling you, that's not happening in the rest of higher ed. And the problem is it's not sustainable. That's the challenge, right? So what we want to do is we want to get to a point where students feel like they have access, like the responsiveness is there on their schedule. You saw some demographics and backgrounds on your students from one of the president's previous presentations. How many of your students work at least part-time, many of them full-time while they're getting their education? How many of them have families of their own? How many of them, particularly since the pandemic, are caring for other people in their home besides their nuclear family? Do they really have time to come to one of your facilities to complete a student service request, to stand in a line, to be able to get help? Do they have time to sit in a Zoom session and wait for their turn to get the counseling and advising that they need? They are going to give up. And if they give up, and you're seeing a little bit of this right now in your enrollment numbers, the first time you're seeing a decline, and you're not seeing a decline from everything we know because they don't have the funds to be able to be here. You're seeing a decline because despite the sheer force of will that you're applying to those personal connections, there are just not enough hours in a day, and you can't get to everyone who wants to be part of the Valencia College experience. So you've got to find another way to do it. So how are we going to do that? We're going to work together to do it. One of the hallmarks of CampusWorks business is that we are highly collaborative. We are going to help you co-create a modern approach to student affairs and student services that's driven by that student experience that you're trying to create. We are going to put the technology at the end of that discovery process instead of at the beginning. Sometimes what we do when we buy a new technology solution is we say, let's ram the way we want to do it into that solution. For those of you in those areas, how well is that working? Right? Not working so great. And what ends up happening is you end up fracturing the real value of the software around the outside. And the other thing that happens is you start doing it yourself. You build your own little Access database, you build your own little spreadsheet, you figure out how to do it manually. You just figure out how to make it happen in a way that is not necessarily the most efficient or effective. We are not coming in here to tell you what to do. You know Valencia better than we will ever know Valencia. But what we do know, our 250 professionals who've worked in higher ed, is we know what other institutions have been doing. We know how to unpack some of the toughest challenges, the wicked problems that you're seeing out there trying to take care of students. And we're going to co-create a way to go forward that's going to make sense for Valencia College. We're also going to be hands and feet for you. A lot of times institutions say, why don't you come in and give us a roadmap for how to improve? And then they take that roadmap and they give it to the tired, beleaguered people who've been working so hard and say, go implement that. Well, the cool thing about this partnership is part of the partnership includes us being with you, right with you side by side, to address and move forward the decisions that you make in this process. We will, as I say, push on the bruise. And what that means is, you know, when you get a bruise, and you have a terrible one right here, and when you bump into something again, it kind of makes you wince. We're going to push you to think differently than you've ever thought before. This is an enormous investment for your institution. And it comes at a time when students have much more choice than they've ever had before. If you make it difficult to come through Valencia College, they have lots of other options. Lots of other options. I was just on a call with a college president this week, and her college in Baltimore is partnered with Southern New Hampshire University to provide the first 2 years of college for anyone who wants it, who attends SNU. Community colleges are the community's college. They're also how America gets back to work. And there's lots of choices out there. We want to be sure that you are as competitive as you can possibly be and get more than your fair share of students going forward. And in order to do that, we need to look at the organizational structure, making sure all your time and talent is being used to the best needs of the student. We need to look at the processes. We need to look at those processes in light of policies and say, you know what? Maybe that isn't the best policy for today, for students, the way they look at education right now. Then we need to look at procedures. And then finally, we'll take what you envision as the future and build it into your technology. That's the opportunity we have together. We're privileged to have been selected to take you forward. Happy to address any questions from the board.
I'm sure you're going to get a few. We'll start on my left.
No. Wow. Well, I asked it yesterday in my briefing, but can you name some of your current clients, some of the other institutions that you work with?
Yes, delighted to do so. Dallas College recently went from 7 independent colleges under a district umbrella. They have now had to rationalize with our help to become a single college with 7 campuses and 1 accreditation. They also needed to unpack every student service that was provided. Much as you were organized, they were very, very decentralized. They had a lot of repetition, but not consistency. So if a student went to one of the colleges, they had this kind of registration experience. And when they went to a neighboring college, even though it was part of the Dallas district, it was a completely different experience. So part of what we did with them is similar to what we'll be doing with you, in that we'll be talking about how do we create a consistent experience for students, no matter how and where they matriculate. The other one, I was talking to Chef Alex, and one of the ones we really had a lot of fun with was the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park. And one of the reasons that is important to you is because their student services approach, their academic scheduling approach that they had, and their technology kept them from their ability to expand their programs. If you ended up having to stop out because during your knife skills class, you put a slice down the middle of your hand, you had to wait a full year before you could come back into a program. Some of it was process, some of it was technology. So in collaboration with them, we recreated the approach, and they never skipped a step as a result during the pandemic. We got that in right under the wire so that there was some flexibility. About 60% of our clients are community colleges, as I said. Some of them are very large districts and some of them are very small. What they have in common is a changing perspective on what it is to be a community college. And each community college is taking a different view of that. Some, like the one in Baltimore, looking very broadly. Some are offering degrees nationally, like Rio National, part of Rio Salado, the Maricopa district in Arizona. We help them to figure out how they could present a national portfolio.
Any more questions?
Yes. Do you adjust to the specific of the college area to apply? For example, Osceola, Poinciana are over 50% Hispanic.
Yes.
Or your program is based overall national?
So we have a series of methodologies, which are frameworks that we apply, not answers, just frameworks that we use to discover the best approach with you to how to address the challenges. One of our clients is Arizona Western College in Yuma, Arizona, right on the border. They have many, many students that come from Mexico every day to come to class.
Mm-hmm.
Their big, hairy, audacious goal in their strategic plan, that's exactly what they call it, is to double baccalaureate degree attainment in their county. But they don't offer baccalaureate degrees. But what they're looking at is how to take those students who might be first generation students who are coming from Mexico into their community and support them in a way that's completely unique. Yet they have a whole nother population at one of their other campuses that does not suffer the same challenges. And so when you look at implementing solutions, you've got to look at equity. And that is one of the challenges we're seeing as a result of this time when we've stepped away. Have your students all had the availability, the knowledge, the tools, the connections to actually be able to move through the Valencia College system? And what I think you found, like many of the schools have, no, we don't. There's going to be a separate workshop that we're conducting with your faculty, staff, and administrators on diversity, equity, and inclusion as it applies to really getting these processes to be completely open and accessible, and a testing, if you will. We'll actually have one of our team members who's certified in DIE, being a standing member of the team, constantly reminding all of us of what we need to look at to make sure there's open access.